She only wanted to outshine the village at the charity picnic, but one lemon drizzle, one collapse, and one stolen fingerprint turned her afternoon into a murder scene. This is Agatha Raisin and the Poisoned Picnic. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Your comments make this cozy corner feel even warmer, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next mystery. Carsely woke beneath a crisp, bright morning that looked almost smug about it. Sunshine glinted off the Honeystone cottages as if the village had polished itself overnight. Agatha Raisin, glaring at the sky from her bedroom window, found the whole thing suspiciously cheerful. Clear weather meant outdoor socializing, and outdoor socializing meant villagers with opinions. She could handle gossip. She simply preferred to control it. She turned from the window with a mutter and surveyed the chaos on her bed. A floral dress lay sprawled across the duvet like a mistake she had already committed. Agatha had bought it in a burst of misguided optimism the previous week. It was far too bright, far too floaty, and far too honest about her age. Still, it was the annual Carsely Green charity picnic, and she intended, if not to shine, at least to avoid looking drab among the WI members. Hodge sat beside the dress, tail flicking with the offended dignity of a cat forced to witness human folly. His amber eyes glinted with skepticism as Agatha lifted the frock. "Don't judge me," she said, though she did that enough for both of them. He blinked at her and sniffed the air. Agatha followed his gaze to the new picnic basket sitting on the table. It was a handsome, expensively woven thing she'd bought from a smirking shop assistant in Evesham. Inside it sat a quiche she had baked that morning, which was to say she had removed it from its packaging and sprinkled parsley on top. Hodge clearly suspected the truth. "It's fine," she said, closing the basket firmly. "Everyone cheats at picnics." She dressed, dabbed on perfume, and applied lipstick with a steady hand. Looking at her reflection, she tilted her chin. Not bad, not youthful, but not defeated either. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and headed downstairs, basket in hand, mood balanced precariously between pride and irritation. The village green was already lively when she arrived. Blankets dotted the grass, children shrieked around a maple someone had dragged out of storage, and a trestle table sagged under the weight of cakes. Agatha paused for effect, hoping for at least one admiring glance. Instead, she got Doris Simpson. "Agatha, dear," Doris called, waddling over with a knowing smile. "Your quiche looks remarkably similar to the one from the Evesham deli. Such a coincidence." A few WI ladies turned their heads. Agatha felt heat creep up her neck. "It's homemade," she snapped. "Completely homemade," Doris sniffed. "Of course, dear. Some of us simply have the same talent as professional bakers." Agatha's jaw tightened. Mrs. Bloxby drifted over like a calm breeze, offering a gentle smile. "Your basket is lovely, Mrs. Raisin. It suits the day." "It had better," Agatha muttered. "It cost half my patience." Before Mrs. Bloxby could reply, Charles Frayth strolled up, hands in pockets, wearing that lazy, aristocratic ease Agatha always found infuriating. "You look charming," he said, "almost bucolic." "Don't start," she warned. "Never. I wouldn't dare." And then came Roy Silver, appearing like a neon sign amid pastel bunting. Dressed in striped trousers and a shirt loud enough to startle birds, he waved dramatically. "Aggie, isn't this divine? I'm doing research on village culture for a new PR initiative. Rural authenticity is very in." "You'll frighten the sheep," Agatha said. "No sheep present," Roy replied, glancing around. "Only locals. Similar temperament." Agatha rolled her eyes, but couldn't quite suppress a smile. She enjoyed Roy's nonsense more than she admitted. The picnic gathered pace. People milled about, nibbling sausage rolls and making pointed remarks about each other's contributions. Agatha, determined to win back dignity, announced she would run a small raffle for charity. The WI ladies perked up. Charles raised an eyebrow. Roy clapped. She placed her new basket in the center of the table to draw tickets. Only after the crowd cooed over it did she realize she had accidentally labeled it first prize. Mrs. Bloxby, ever tactful, murmured, "You can always say it's symbolic." Doris Simpson pounced. "Oh, how generous of you, Agatha, giving away your lovely new basket." Agatha bit back a scream. "Yes," she said tightly, "generosity is my curse." She had no time to recover before Penelope Prouse, the picnic organizer, swept in. Penelope was a brisk, angular woman with a voice built for committee meetings. She plonked a lemon drizzle cake onto the table and glared at Agatha as if holding her responsible for climate change. "You moved my cake," Penelope barked. "I shifted it an inch so it wouldn't fall," Agatha replied. "It was perfectly stable." It was leaning like a drunk. Their mutual disdain was almost comforting. At least Penelope was reliably unpleasant. Penelope sliced herself a large piece of her cake. The WI women watched like a panel of judges. Penelope lifted the fork, took a bite, and gave a self-satisfied nod, then froze. Her eyes widened, her face contorted. The fork dropped. She collapsed to the grass in a twitchy, alarming heap. A collective shriek rose. Plates clattered. Someone shouted for water. Someone else shouted for space. Agatha was shoved back as villagers surged forward. She stared at Penelope, her heart jolting with the dreadful, familiar thrill only crime could deliver. "She's fainted," someone cried. "No, she's poisoned," yelled another. Bill Wong arrived at a brisk trot, face set in professional lines. "Everyone step back," he ordered. "Give her air." Agatha moved aside, pulse racing. Bill knelt beside Penelope, checked her pulse, and signaled for an ambulance. He looked up and caught Agatha's eye with a meaningful expression, too meaningful for her liking. "I didn't do anything," she said quickly. "I didn't say you did," Bill replied, "but everyone saw you arguing." "She argued with half the village." "Yes," Bill said mildly, "but they like the other half." Agatha bristled. "I'm being framed by incompetence." Bill sighed. "Just stay available." The ambulance whisked Penelope away, leaving the picnic in fraught disarray. Children were ushered home. The WI ladies whispered fiercely in tight circles. Charles stood beside Agatha, hands in pockets again, gaze thoughtful. "Well," he said, "this will ruin the raffle." Agatha glowered. "I nearly died of embarrassment. And that's your comment?" "You're alive," he said. "Penelope isn't, well, she is, but only barely." Roy hurried up, eyes glittering with excitement. "Aggie, darling, I've already got 3 London friends asking for updates. Do you think it was sabotage? It feels like sabotage." Agatha exhaled sharply. Her morning had promised sunshine and self-display. It had delivered humiliation and suspicion. A familiar weariness settled under her ribs, the kind that came from knowing she had been both wronged and observed closely while being wronged. As villagers dispersed, Bill returned. "She's alive," he said, "poisoned. Preliminary signs suggest almond traces." Agatha felt the air tighten. Almond meant trouble. Penelope meant enemies. "And," Bill added, "several people saw you near her table before the collapse." Agatha stared at him. "I was organizing a raffle." "Yes," Bill said gently, "and apparently arguing with her." Agatha resisted the urge to scream. She stood very still, basketless, pride wounded, and village eyes upon her. Trouble had arrived, and she was, inevitably, at the heart of it. Hodge would have warned her, she thought grimly, if only she'd listened. Carsely Green had the strained hush of a place trying very hard not to stare. A few blankets remained where families had abandoned them, corners fluttering in the mild breeze. Police tape looped around the trestle tables with theatrical drama, and villagers stood nearby pretending the tape was merely an inconvenience in their route home. Agatha doubted a single one intended to leave. She stood at the edge of the cordon, arms folded, jaw set. She had faced dragons in the form of London executives, but there was something worse about a semicircle of WI women whispering 6 feet away. Bill Wong approached with his usual calm expression. "Just a few questions, Mrs. Raisin." "Then ask them quickly," Agatha replied, "before Doris Simpson writes a pamphlet about me." Bill's mouth twitched. "You argued with Mrs. Prowse." "I had a small disagreement. Everyone has small disagreements." This one was witnessed. "Of course it was," Agatha muttered. "If I sneezed, the WI would record it for posterity." Bill took out his notebook. "Did you see anyone near her table before she collapsed?" Agatha hesitated. She had been fussing with the raffle tickets, annoyed at Penelope, annoyed at the basket fiasco, annoyed at life. But she hadn't noticed anyone suspicious, only villagers bumbling about with plates. "No, just the usual crowd," she said. A cackle drifted from the gossip knot behind her. "She was shouting," said a voice that belonged unmistakably to Ivy Cummings. Agatha spun. "I was not shouting." We heard raised tones, added Alice Withers primly as though chairing a tribunal. Raised tones, Agatha repeated. Penelope breathed like a reprimand. That counts as raised. Mrs. Blocksby appeared with a gentle cough. Perhaps we should all step back and let Bill work, Ivy sniffed. Alice folded her arms. The pair drifted away, still whispering. Agatha turned back to Bill, scowling. You see? They're circling like hens with opinions. Bill was saved from answering by a shout from one of the constables. Sergeant! Over here! He excused himself and crossed to the trestle table. Agatha followed at a determined trot. The constable held up an empty cake tin, Penelope's by the label on the bottom, except it wasn't the tin Penelope had used earlier. This one looked identical but for the faint scuff at the rim. Where did that come from? Agatha asked. Under the corner of the table, the constable replied. Someone tucked it there. And the original? Bill asked. Missing. Agatha felt a flicker of triumph. Someone switched them. That's deliberate. Bill nodded gravely. It suggests planning. And it wasn't me, Agatha said sharply, before he could even open his mouth. A rustle of skirts signalled more WI involvement. Alice and Ivy hovered again, trying to look helpful. Mrs. Blocksby leaned toward Agatha, her voice quiet. Those two were whispering earlier, something about Penelope being unreasonable at the last meeting. Penelope was always unreasonable, Agatha said. Yes, Mrs. Blocksby replied, but she made a point of criticising Ivy's cake display, and Alice's volunteering rota. Agatha's eyebrows rose. So, they're both suspects. Everyone is, Mrs. Blocksby said gently. Even you. Thank you, Agatha muttered. Charles Fraith, having returned from a stroll around the green, approached with hands in pockets. Bill has it in hand, he said. You could let him do his job. Don't patronise me, Agatha snapped. I know when something is off. You always know, Charles agreed, with a lazy smile that wasn't remotely reassuring. Roy Silver, meanwhile, had fashioned a notepad from folded napkins and was interviewing an elderly couple with breathless intensity. Did you feel tension in the air? Emotional friction, a sense of rising doom? We were eating sausage rolls, the man replied. Agatha groaned. Roy will turn this into a 3-part documentary if someone doesn't stop him. She stalked toward the raffle table, irritation fueling her steps. The basket she had lost still sat proudly in the winner's arms nearby. She ignored the pang of regret and scanned the surface of the table. Something sticky caught her eye, a thin smear of sugary glaze on the wood, drying in the sun. It hadn't been there earlier. She leaned closer. The smear had a faint scent, sweet, but with an almond undernote. Her stomach tightened. She glanced around and spotted a teacup near the edge, forgotten in the commotion. She picked it up, sniffed cautiously, and caught the same almond trace. Poison didn't always smell like almonds, but almond was rarely innocent. Footsteps approached. She tucked the cup into her bag just as Bill returned. Smell this, Agatha said, handing Bill the cup. Bill bagged it. Almond, I'll send it to the lab. Agatha, he said, I need you to go home for now. The scene needs clearing and you're attracting commentary. Commentary, she repeated coldly. Lovely. I'll phone you if I need you. You always need me, she said, but he had already moved on. Charles fell into step beside her. You did well not to bite anyone. I nearly bit Ivy, Agatha said. She deserves it. She usually does. They walked to the edge of the green where blankets lay abandoned like casualties. Damp patches showed where lemonade had spilled. A child's toy rabbit sat alone near the maypole. The earlier laughter had evaporated, leaving the village in uneasy silence. They're all convinced I poisoned Penelope, Agatha said. Not all, Charles replied. Only the vocal half. The vocal half is always the dangerous one. She paused, glancing back at the commotion. Villagers stood in earnest clusters. Everyone gestured too much. Everyone looked too knowing. Agatha's humiliation from earlier had sharpened into anger. She wasn't going to be anyone's easy scapegoat. I'm going to find out who did this, she said. I suspected as much, Charles murmured. When she reached home, Hodge greeted her with a slow blink and an accusing meow. She stroked him, tension softening a little. The cottage smelled faintly of the morning's perfume and the lingering disappointment of the failed picnic. She had barely set her basket down when the phone rang. She snatched it up, expecting another villager eager for gossip. Agatha, Bill's voice carried a quiet urgency. Penelope's awake. And? She remembers something. Agatha's heart gave a small jolt. What? She says she saw someone switch the cake just before she fell. Did she see who? No, Bill said, just the action, but it means this wasn't accidental. Agatha leaned against the counter. Hodge wound around her ankles. Her humiliation faded to something colder, sharper. Good, she said. Then we have a murderer. Bill sighed. Don't get involved. I'm already involved. Agatha, Bill dear, she said, cutting him off. I'm going to help whether you like it or not. She placed the phone down with a decisive click. Hodge stared at her as if questioning her sanity. Don't look at me like that, she said. Someone framed me and I'm not having it. Hodge flicked his tail and hopped onto a chair, settling like a judge preparing to watch events unfold. Agatha exhaled and squared her shoulders. The village could whisper all it liked. She had clues, a motive to clear her name, and enough indignation to power a small generator. Tomorrow, she would begin. Tonight, she would think, and perhaps, she considered, eyeing the cupboard, allow herself one small, consolatory glass of wine. Just one. Carsely greeted Agatha the next morning with a sky the colour of cold washing-up water. A thin drizzle drifted over the cottages in that half-hearted way that always irritated her. Rain was tolerable when it flung itself down with purpose. This was merely smug, as if the weather enjoyed sabotaging hair and mood. Agatha stood at her gate with her handbag, umbrella, and an air of righteous determination. She was going to Mercester Hospital, and heaven help anyone who tried to slow her down. Hodge watched from the window, tail swishing, giving her the expression he reserved for moments when she was clearly about to embarrass herself. "Stay there," she told him, "and don't sulk if I'm late." He blinked back with the serenity of a creature who had never queued in a hospital corridor. The roads to Mercester were damp but manageable. Agatha drove in muttering bursts, replaying yesterday's events. She refused to be framed for poisoning Penelope Prowse. Yes, she had disliked the woman, but disliking people was practically a village hobby. If that counted as motive, half of Carsely would be behind bars. The hospital foyer smelled of disinfectant and burned coffee. Agatha strode to the reception desk. "Penelope Prowse," she announced. "Visitor. Essential visitor." The receptionist, a young woman with a bun so tight it looked painful, pointed her toward the lifts. "Second floor, acute observation." "Charming label," Agatha muttered. Bill Wong appeared at the lift just as she reached it, hands in his pockets, an expression already full of patience. "I hoped you'd wait for me." "I'm not waiting for anyone," Agatha said. "Penelope saw someone switch the cake. I need to hear exactly what she remembers." "You need to stay calm," Bill replied. "Don't patronize me," she snapped. "I can be calm." "I've noticed," he said mildly. They reached Penelope's room, where a nurse hovered with a clipboard. Penelope lay propped up on pillows, her face pale, but her attitude intact. She eyed Agatha with suspicion, which was almost comforting. Penelope's dislike was reliable. "Mrs. Prowse," Bill said gently, "thank you for speaking to us. Can you tell us what you remember?" Penelope cleared her throat with unnecessary drama. "I was preparing my cake, the lemon drizzle. It was meant to be the centerpiece." She paused as if awaiting applause. Agatha folded her arms. "Get on with it." Penelope continued. "I stepped away to fetch a napkin. When I returned, I saw someone lean over my basket." "Who?" Agatha asked. "They wore a large floppy sun hat," Penelope said. "Ridiculously floppy. I couldn't see the face." Agatha exchanged a look with Bill. A floppy sun hat hardly narrowed things down. Every WI member owned one. "Anything else?" Bill asked. Penelope hesitated. "I had received notes, anonymous notes, saying I was mismanaging village events, that I was overbearing." Agatha snorted. "Overbearing? Whoever wrote that wasn't anonymous. That's the WI's group opinion." "Agatha," Bill warned. Penelope sniffed. "I kept them, you know, in my handbag. They were rude." "Do you have them?" Bill asked. "Gone," Penelope said. "My handbag disappeared during the picnic." That caught Agatha's attention. Notes, a missing bag, and a switched cake. Someone had planned this far too neatly. She opened her mouth to voice this when Bill shot her a warning look. "Let Mrs. Prowse rest," he said. "We'll follow this up." Penelope waved a languid hand. "Do, and don't let her—" She pointed at Agatha. twist things. Agatha bristled. I'm trying to help. Penelope snorted in a way that suggested the very idea caused her physical discomfort. Outside the room, Agatha huffed. Floppy sun hat, honestly. It could be anyone. Ivy, Alice, half the WI. Mrs. Cartwright probably wears one indoors. It's still a clue, Bill said. Barely. They walked toward the lift. 2 nurses stood nearby, chatting in low voices, clearly enjoying a gossip break. Her husband didn't even come last night, said one. Graham Prowse never bothers, always working late. Working late, the other echoed with skepticism. He's checked out, hardly noticed his wife was ill. Agatha slowed, pretending to adjust her handbag while she listened. Typical, she murmured. Marriage as performed by wallpaper. Bill raised an eyebrow. You're eavesdropping. No, I'm utilizing available resources. That's what eavesdropping is. Semantics, Agatha said. Graham Prowse is a suspect. Mark him down. I'll speak to him, Bill replied. You, however, should go home. I'll go where I please. That's what worries me. The lift arrived, saving them from further debate. Outside, the drizzle had intensified by a miserable fraction. Agatha snapped open her umbrella, muttering dark thoughts about Penelope, husbands, sun hats, and the general idiocy of human beings. By the time she reached Carsely, her irritation had curdled into fierce motivation. She marched straight to the vicarage, her shoes squelching faintly. Mrs. Bloxby opened the door with her usual gentle smile. Agatha, dear, you look windswept. Penelope is awake, Agatha said, brushing damp strands from her forehead. And she claims someone in a floppy sun hat poisoned her, which is useless because everyone owns one. Not everyone, Mrs. Bloxby said. Doris prefers berets. So Doris is innocent, Agatha said, for once. Mrs. Bloxby ushered her inside. The vicarage smelled of baking and furniture polish, a comfort after the sterile hospital. There's something else, she said gently. Penelope had many rivals. Leadership can make enemies, but jealousy makes more. Agatha frowned. Get to the point. Lila Trent, Mrs. Bloxby said softly. Shy, talented baker. Penelope humiliated her at the last bake-off, criticised her sponge for lacking vision. Vision, Agatha repeated. It's cake, not opera. Precisely, and Lila left the meeting in tears. Agatha considered this. Lila, with her quiet voice and anxious smile, seemed too timid for poison. Then again, Penelope was the sort of woman who brought out hidden wrath in others. Maybe she snapped. Or maybe she knows something, Mrs. Bloxby said. You have a way of drawing people out. Yes, Agatha said, usually by irritating them. Mrs. Bloxby smiled kindly. Sometimes irritation reveals truth. Agatha felt the compliment land in that uncomfortable space between praise and rebuke. She sipped the tea Mrs. Bloxby handed her, letting the warmth settle her mood. A loud knock interrupted them. Roy Silver burst into the room wearing a monstrous get-well balloon tied to his wrist like a festive shackle. Aggie, I came as soon as I heard. Hospital gossip is so dreary you simply must give me details. Roy, why are you wearing that thing? Atmosphere, he said, posing with the balloon. Penelope will adore it. Penelope will stab it, Agatha said. Then at least she's recovering. Mrs. Bloxby hid a smile behind her teacup. Roy, dear, perhaps you could untie it before visiting her. Nonsense, he said, but he began struggling with the ribbon. Agatha rose, mood sharper now. I need to talk to Lila. She's involved somehow. Victim, witness, suspect, or combination thereof. Mrs. Bloxby nodded. Be gentle. I'm always gentle, Agatha said. Both Roy and Mrs. Bloxby stared at her. Fine, Agatha conceded. I'll try. She left the vicarage feeling steadier, though the drizzle had returned to its passive-aggressive mist. By late afternoon, she reached her cottage again. Hodge greeted her with a long stretch and a pointed stare that said she had missed his lunch window by a scandalous margin. You're spoiled, she told him, filling his bowl. Only after the house grew quiet did she notice something on the floor just inside the front door. A small white envelope slid beneath the wood. Her pulse tightened. She picked it up, hands careful, and unfolded the single sheet inside. The message was written in neat block capitals. You don't belong in this village. Agatha stared at it, cold anger blooming beneath her ribs. Above her, Hodge leapt onto the sideboard, tail flicking like a metronome of judgment. "Oh, I belong," she muttered, "and I'll prove it." She placed the note beside the kettle and reached for a mug, her mind already burning through possibilities. Someone had gone to the trouble of threatening her. Someone feared her involvement. Good, she thought grimly. They should. Tomorrow she would begin digging. Tonight she would plan. And although she refused to pour a gin, she stood at the window with Hodge beside her, watching the drizzle thin into evening, feeling the familiar weight of a mystery tightening around her. Carsely greeted Agatha the next morning with a thin wash of weak sunlight, the sort that tried to look optimistic and failed. It brightened the hedgerows half-heartedly and made the puddles glimmer as if to apologize for existing. Agatha stepped outside her cottage with her handbag, a purposeful stride, and eyes that promised trouble for anyone standing between her and answers. The anonymous note still sat on her kitchen table, a white slash of menace. She refused to let fear settle in. Fear was for people who didn't own umbrellas or instincts. Charles Frayth's vintage convertible idled outside her gate. He leaned against it with his usual aristocratic ease. "You're marching like Boudicca again," he said. "I've been threatened," Agatha replied. "I march when threatened." "You also march when complimented." "Don't distract me." Charles held up a thermos. "Tea? You look like someone who needs tea." "I need justice," Agatha said, snatching the cup anyway. The warmth steadied her fingers. "We're going back to the picnic site." "Of course we are," Charles replied, "because nothing says leisure like inspecting grass for clues." They reached Carsely Green, now quiet except for a dog walker and a man sweeping leaves with tragic determination. The police tape had been removed, though the trestle tables still stood like tired soldiers. Agatha strode to the place where Penelope had collapsed. If Penelope saw someone switching the cake, the culprit must have left something behind. People always leave something behind. "Not you," Charles said. "You tidy crime scenes by instinct." "Oh, be quiet." They worked methodically, though Agatha's version of methodical involved stomping through hedges as if they'd insulted her. She paused near a thick clump of hawthorn bushes and crouched. "Here," she said. "Look." Charles leaned closer. A smear of blue streaked one of the lower branches. The shade was unmistakable, bright icing blue, the same shade Penelope had used to decorate her cake edges. "They tried to hide something in here," Agatha said, eyes narrowing. "Probably wrappers, or gloves, or—" She plunged her hand into the hedge. Charles made a polite sound of protest as branches scratched her arms. Agatha withdrew with a triumphant flourish, holding up a torn piece of shiny paper. "Cake wrapper," she declared. "From a pre-made sponge. Penelope always baked from scratch. She considered it a moral duty." "So someone replaced part of her bake," Charles said. "Pre-made sponge for homemade cake." "Or handled it using wrapper rubbish they later tried to ditch." Agatha turned the paper over and sniffed. Icing sugar, lemon zest. This was thrown out in a hurry. Charles folded his arms. "Agatha, you realize Bill will be furious when he learns you've trampled a potential crime scene." "Bill can be furious later," she said. "Right now, I'm furious." They gathered the wrapper into Agatha's handbag and headed toward the village. The WI Hall loomed ahead, its stone facade catching the sun in a soft glow. The hall always smelled faintly of sponge cake, floor polish, and competing egos. Today, those egos were in full battle formation. The WI meeting was already underway, though meeting was a generous term. Chaos might have been more accurate. Alice Withers stood by the counter, fussing with plates as if scrubbing away guilt. Ivy Cummings hovered near the window, arms crossed so tightly she looked in danger of snapping. Lila Trent sat at a table with her hands trembling near a cup of untouched tea. Every head turned as Agatha entered. "Oh no," Ivy muttered. "The investigator returns." "You say that as if it's an insult," Agatha replied, sweeping into the room. "Which it isn't." Mrs. Bloxby rose from a chair near the back and gave Agatha a small, encouraging nod. It was the sort of nod that could stop wars, or at least soften gossip. Agatha planted her handbag on a chair. "Right. Someone broke into Lila's kitchen. Who wants to explain that?" Lila let out a shaky breath. "My door was locked. I swear it was. But when I woke yesterday, my tins were moved. Someone had scraped my icing, and one of my sponges was missing." Alice Withers placed a protective hand on her chest. "Are you accusing us, Lila? Because if so, that's very rude." She's not accusing, Agatha said. She's frightened. There's a difference. Ivy scoffed. Lila always looks frightened. It's her natural expression. Agatha turned her glare on Ivy. Did someone tamper with your bakes too? I don't bake, Ivy sniffed. Baking is for women with patience and low expectations. Then you had no reason to be near Penelope's cake. I didn't say that, Ivy snapped. I walked past it, yes, but I didn't poison anyone. Alice spoke up. I saw a woman in a floppy hat near the table. That should be obvious by now. Everyone in this hall owns a floppy hat, Agatha said. It's the WI uniform. It's like accusing everyone of owning elbows. Alice pursed her lips. No need to be sarcastic. There's every need, Agatha replied. You're obstructing progress. A murmur of indignation rippled through the group. Mrs. Blocksby stepped forward with her soothing voice. Ladies, please. Agatha is only trying to help. For once, Ivy muttered. For always, Agatha corrected. She moved toward the kitchen area of the hall and inspected the counter surfaces. One patch gleamed suspiciously. Too clean. Gleaming like someone had scrubbed it within an inch of its life. Someone wiped this down, Agatha said. Recently, and not thoroughly. The smell's unmistakable. She lifted her nose. Lemon oil polish. Alice gasped. We haven't used lemon oil in months. Then who did this? Agatha asked. Only someone hiding something would polish a crime scene. A hush settled. Even Ivy looked unsettled. Mrs. Blocksby approached with a small tray. Agatha, dear, look at this. Resting on a napkin was a gold button. It gleamed with a raised emblem. Where did you find that? Agatha demanded. Near the back door, Mrs. Blocksby said softly. I thought you should see it. Agatha held the button to the light. This belongs to a blazer. A very specific blazer. Ivy, don't you have one with gold buttons? Ivy's face tightened. I lost one last month. Did you? Agatha said. Or last night. The room held its breath. Ivy's jaw clenched. I don't have to tolerate this. She grabbed her handbag and stormed toward the door. Her dramatic exit would have been more effective had the door not jammed on the first pull. She yanked again, cheeks reddening, and finally slipped out with a huff. Well, Agatha said, that was subtle. Lila let out a small sob. Alice fluttered about with a tissue. Mrs. Blocksby gave Agatha a warning glance, the kind that said, yes, interrogate, but perhaps with less fire. Agatha softened only marginally. Lila, did Penelope ever accuse you of anything, aside from lacking vision? Lila blinked. She once said my bakes were too domestic, and she thought I undercharged at the last fundraiser. She said someone was stealing money from bake sales. Agatha straightened. Stealing funds? She said that? Yes, Lila whispered. She said she knew who, but she never told us. Agatha looked around the hall. The WI women had resumed whispering, forming alliances with glances. It was a nest of nerves, pride, and half-hidden resentments, a perfect breeding ground for grudges. Right, Agatha said. I've heard enough. Everyone here had motive. Everyone had access. But only one of you used lemon oil yesterday. Not a single woman admitted anything. Mrs. Blocksby touched Agatha's arm. Perhaps we should step outside. Agatha followed her into the corridor where the air felt calmer. This whole group is guilty of something, she said. Yes, Mrs. Blocksby replied, but not necessarily poisoning. Agatha sighed. I'm getting threats now. Mrs. Blocksby's face tightened. What sort of threats? Agatha described both notes. Mrs. Blocksby's concern deepened. Someone is frightened of what you'll discover. Good, Agatha said. They should be. She spent the afternoon pacing her cottage, turning over clues with increasing agitation. Hodge followed her with lazy interest, occasionally leaping onto furniture as if offering moral support. By evening, the sky had deepened into a calm blue. Agatha boiled the kettle, prepared tea, and tried to enjoy a moment of quiet. She had just sat down when a soft sound reached the door, a subtle slide like paper against wood. Hodge's ears twitched. Agatha stood, crossed the room, and opened the door. Another envelope lay on the mat. Her stomach tightened. She picked it up, unfolded the sheet, and read, "Stop prying, or you'll regret it." Agatha stared at the words until they blurred. Fury simmered beneath her ribs, steady and dangerous. "Well," she said to Hodge, who had hopped onto a chair watching her with wide eyes, "they've made their mistake." Hodge settled in a loaf shape, as if bracing for the storm to come. Agatha placed the note beside the first, lit a small lamp and sat down. The fear had vanished. Only resolve remained now. Someone in Carsely had crossed a line, and Agatha Raisin never let that go unpunished. Carsely began the day in a thin wash of pale sunshine, the kind that gave hedgerows a shy sparkle but didn't commit to real warmth. Agatha stood at her mirror brushing her hair briskly. She had slept badly, wedged between fear, fury, and the absolute certainty that someone in the village needed a good shaking. Hodge watched from the bed, curled in a compact loaf, tail flicking with mild disapproval. He always glared when she woke in a temper. "Don't look at me like that," she muttered. "Someone's framing me and you're judging my hair." Hodge blinked, unimpressed. She left the cottage with her handbag and a stride that suggested she was marching into battle. Bill Wong had phoned earlier, asking her to accompany him to speak with Penelope's husband, Graham Prowse. He had used the word accompany in the cautious tone people adopted when dealing with unstable explosives. Bill waited beside his hatchback, tie neatly knotted, expression weary before the day even began. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I'm coming because I choose to," Agatha replied, "not because you asked." "I assumed." They drove toward Mercester's suburban fringe, where tidy, semi-detached houses sat in quietly resentful rows. Graham Prowse's house looked immaculate, as if polished for an estate agent's brochure. The curtains matched the flowers matched the doormat. It was all terribly coordinated and therefore deeply suspect. Graham opened the door with a stiff smile. He was a roundish man with thinning hair and an aftershave cloud strong enough to stun mid-sized livestock. "Sergeant Wong," he said, "and Mrs. Raisin, do come in." The living room smelled aggressively of pine air freshener. Everything was too neat, too symmetrical. Even the cushions sat at identical angles, which Agatha found unnatural. "How is Penelope?" Graham asked, pouring coffee with exaggerated concern. "Recovering," Bill said. "She mentioned receiving anonymous notes, and she said something about your accounts." A visible tremor passed through Graham's left eyelid. "Misunderstanding," he said quickly. "Just an honest mistake in the picnic fund totals. I must have written a 7 instead of a 1. Agatha leaned forward. "That's not a mistake. That's a new number." Graham ignored her. "My wife worries too much. She takes her responsibilities far too seriously." "She was nearly murdered," Agatha said. "That seems a valid worry." Graham twitched. "Yes, quite. Terrible business. But I assure you, I had nothing to do with it." Agatha's gaze drifted to a pair of gardening gloves by the door. Clean. Too clean. As if someone had washed them very recently. She filed that away. Bill continued the questioning, gentle but firm. Graham repeated the same benign phrases, the same excuses, the same odd detachment. Not once did he ask whether Penelope had asked for him at the hospital. As they left, Agatha muttered, "He didn't care at all, not even a flicker." "Some people show worry differently," Bill said. "Yes," Agatha replied, "by hiding their wife's notebook, scrubbing their gloves, and smelling like a chemist." "Agatha, I'm right," she declared. "Don't pretend I'm not." Bill didn't answer, which was as good as agreement. They drove back toward Carsely. Bill dropped her at the village shop, where Charles Fraith leaned against the wall reading a newspaper as if posing for a lazy aristocrat calendar. "How was darling Graham?" he asked. "Guilt wrapped in pine spray," Agatha replied. "I want to speak with Lila." Charles folded the paper. "I'll drive you." She accepted, mostly because she didn't want the walk. They reached Lila Trent's cottage on Honeysuckle Row, a place that always smelled faintly of sponge cake. Today, however, a sour note lingered under the sweetness. Lila opened the door, eyes rimmed red. "Oh, Mrs. Raisin, I didn't expect company." "You need to talk," Agatha said, "and I need answers. A perfect combination." The kitchen was a mess, which was rare for Lila. A few tins lay scattered. The window latch hung crooked. "Someone forced their way in," Lila whispered. "Or they pretended to. I don't know. I just know someone touched my bakes. My icing was smudged. One sponge missing." "Penelope accused you of stealing bake sale funds," Agatha said softly. "Did she threaten you?" Lila's face crumpled. "She said my prices were too low. She said someone was pocketing the difference. She implied it was me, but I never stole anything." "You envied her," Agatha pressed. "Naturally. She lorded over everyone." "I envied her confidence," Lila said, "not her cruelty." Charles wandered around the kitchen, peering at the windowsill. "This scratch on the latch looks deliberate," he said, "but the outside paint isn't chipped." "Meaning?" Agatha asked. "Meaning someone staged it," Charles replied. Lila wrung her hands. "Why would anyone do that?" "To make you look guilty," Agatha said, "or to frighten you, or to confuse me. I resent all three possibilities." Her eyes drifted to the counter. A faint line of blue icing streaked across the surface. She lifted it with her finger. "This matches Penelope's cake. Someone brought icing in here, which means someone was moving evidence around." Lila began to tremble again. Charles shot Agatha a warning glance. Agatha sighed and softened her tone. "No one thinks you poisoned her. Frail people don't choose poison. They choose cake." Lila gave a tiny laugh, though her hands still shook. They stayed a few more minutes, but the kitchen yielded nothing else. As they stepped outside, a squawking noise erupted near the WI hall. Agatha frowned. "That's Roy, isn't it?" "Almost certainly," Charles said. They hurried toward the sound and found Roy Silver running for his life across the small patch of grass behind the hall. A furious goose thundered after him, wings flapping like a deranged windmill. "Aggie!" Roy shrieked. "Call off the beast!" "It's not mine," Agatha called. "Do I look like someone who keeps geese?" "You keep everything else." Charles clapped a hand to his mouth to stifle laughter. Agatha stepped forward, waving her arms. "Shoo! Go away! Attack a burglar!" The goose paused, glared at her, then returned to pecking Roy's shoe as if insulted by his wardrobe. Eventually Roy scrambled behind Agatha, panting. "I was filming a rural crime segment. Very tasteful. Minimal screaming until now." "What did you find?" Agatha asked. "Drama, suspense. A woman in curlers threw a scone at me." "Useless," Agatha said. "Rude," Roy huffed. Charles, meanwhile, wandered toward a rubbish bin near the hall's side door. "Agatha," he called, voice sharpened, "you need to see this." She strode over. Inside the bin, beneath a layer of paper plates, lay a cake tin. Not just any tin. Penelope's tin. The original, unmistakable by the small dent on its rim. "Well, well," Agatha said. "Someone ditched it." She pulled it out carefully. Blue icing residue clung to the corner. She tilted it, and a faint smudge revealed itself, a fingerprint pressed into the sugary film. "Bill will want this," Charles said. "And I want the glory," Agatha replied. When Bill arrived, summoned by a terse phone call, he inspected the tin with a grave face. "Good find. I'll send it in." "And credit me," Agatha added. "I always do." "No, you don't." Bill ignored that, as usual, and sealed the tin in a clear evidence bag. Roy attempted to film the moment, but Bill shot him a look so stern even the goose would have stopped. By late afternoon, Agatha returned home. The house felt still, almost peaceful. Hodge lay on the sofa, flicking his tail in welcome. She sat beside him, letting her mind churn through suspects. Ivy's temper, Alice's pettiness, Graham's suspicious calm, Lila's trembling fear, the WI Hall's lemon oil, the floppy hat. She scooped Hodge into her lap. "Someone wants to ruin me," she murmured. "They're doing a decent job." Hodge stretched a paw across her sleeve, kneading gently, or perhaps warning her not to spiral. The phone rang. She set Hodge down and answered. Bill's voice carried a note of strain. "Agatha, the fingerprint results are back." "Excellent. Whose are they?" A pause. Too long. Too deliberate. "Yours," Bill said quietly. "The fingerprint on the tin belongs to you." Agatha froze, the chill sweeping from her chest to her fingertips. Hodge meowed in confusion. "That's impossible," she said. "I never touched that tin." "I know," Bill replied, "but the lab doesn't." Agatha's hand tightened around the receiver. Someone wasn't merely framing her. They were escalating. "Bill," she said, voice steady despite the fear, "whoever did this is clever." "Yes," Bill said, "and desperate." Agatha replaced the receiver slowly, staring at the cottage wall as Hodge nudged her arm. The village hummed outside with innocent calm, but inside her chest a hot coil of indignation curled. "They want to fight," she murmured. "They'll get one." Hodge settled against her hip, as if bracing for the storm ahead. Carsely's morning light crept through thin clouds like a late apology. It gave the hedgerows a soft green shimmer and touched the cottage roofs with a half-hearted glow. Inside her own cottage, Agatha Raisin was pacing. She stormed from window to kitchen, kitchen to hallway, hallway to sofa, where Hodge had attempted to nap until her footsteps convinced him sleep was impossible. He lay on his side, tail twitching at each turn she made. "I'm being framed," she muttered, for perhaps the 20th time. "Framed by someone who knows what they're doing." Hodge blinked in slow agreement. The jolt of fear she'd felt when Bill told her the fingerprint was hers still sat like a stone in her chest. She was furious, but beneath the fury simmered something she disliked even more. Terror. Someone had taken her life, her reputation, her routines, her messy place in the village, and was twisting it into something sinister. "They stole my fingerprint," she said aloud. "My fingerprint! That's practically intimate." Hodge rolled over with the air of a creature deciding she was beyond help. Agatha stopped pacing, grabbed her handbag, and marched out of the house. The cool air slapped her awake. She crossed the lane, breathing in the familiar scent of Carsely mornings, damp earth, faint chimney smoke, and the lingering sweetness of someone's early baking. She headed straight for the vicarage. Mrs. Bloxby answered before Agatha even knocked twice. "Agatha, dear, you look determined." "Someone is framing me," Agatha declared, pushing inside without waiting for an invitation, though Mrs. Bloxby would have offered one. The vicarage smelled warm and comforting. Tea was brewing somewhere. A plate of scones sat cooling on the dresser. The domestic tranquility clashed unpleasantly with the storm inside Agatha. "Sit down," Mrs. Bloxby said gently. "I can't sit." "You can," Mrs. Bloxby insisted. Agatha sat. Mrs. Bloxby poured her a cup of tea. "Tell me everything." Agatha did. Fingerprint, cake tin, threats, suspicions. She spoke quickly, her words spiralling with agitation. Mrs. Bloxby listened patiently, her serene expression absorbing each detail without judgment. "Agatha," she said when the torrent slowed, "whoever did this knows you. They know how you react. They know how to unsettle you." "Wonderful," Agatha snapped. "My enemies have become insightful." "It suggests a personal motive." Agatha's brows knitted. "My life is crawling with people who resent me. I'd need a telephone directory." "Think carefully," Mrs. Bloxby said. "Who has reason to fear your investigation? Who knew your habits well enough to steal a fingerprint?" Agatha opened her mouth, then closed it. She didn't like the answer forming in her mind, mostly because it was a long list. Mrs. Bloxby rested a gentle hand on her arm. "You're not alone, you know." "I feel alone." "That's different from being alone." Agatha looked away, throat tightening. Mrs. Bloxby always had a knack for slipping kindness into conversations like a ribbon through a buttonhole. "I need to find out who did this," Agatha said. "And I need to do it before Bill starts believing evidence instead of me." Mrs. Bloxby's smile was faint but encouraging. "You always do." Agatha straightened. "Yes, I do." The Red Lion pub was already busy when she pushed through the door. Midday sun filtered through the windows, lighting the dust in warm beams. Villagers sat in small clusters, whispering with the delight of people who pretended to disapprove of gossip while nurturing it like a delicate houseplant. Agatha's entrance created a noticeable ripple. Voices dipped, heads turned. Doris Simpson, seated near the window, gave her a look of deep, theatrical sympathy. "Agatha," Doris called loudly, far too loudly. "We were just talking about you." "I'm sure you were," Agatha muttered. She approached the bar where Charles Fraith waited with 2 glasses, 1 water, 1 white wine. "I wasn't sure which version of your mood would arrive," he said. "Wine," Agatha replied. "Obviously." He handed it over. "Bill dropped by earlier." Agatha narrowed her eyes. "Did he say anything useful?" "Only that you're upset." "It doesn't take a detective to see that." "No," Charles said mildly, "but it takes a brave one to point it out." She resisted the urge to elbow him. Instead, she took a sip of wine and surveyed the room. The villagers were pretending not to watch her. They were failing magnificently. Doris Simpson rose, her expression saintly. "Agatha, dear, I was telling the ladies how brave you were at the picnic." Agatha braced. "Were you?" "Yes. Right before Penelope collapsed, you were standing by the raffle table, weren't you?" "Here we go," Agatha muttered. "Very close," Doris continued, "very suspiciously close." "Oh, do shut up," Agatha snapped. "You say suspicious every time someone breathes." Gasps fluttered. Doris clutched her chest as if struck by a spiritual blow. Charles leaned toward Agatha. "You might try subtlety." "I tried it once," she said. "Didn't care for it." Bill entered at that moment, sparing Doris from further indignation. He surveyed the pub, spotted Agatha, and approached with the look of a man bracing for a small hurricane. "Agatha," he said, "we need to talk." "Then talk." "Some villagers claim you were circling Penelope's table before she collapsed. I was organizing the raffle. Doris says. I don't care what Doris says." "Unfortunately," Bill said, glancing at the gathered villagers, "everyone else does." Agatha gripped her glass. "I'm being framed, Bill. You must see that." "I do," he said softly, "but I need evidence, not instinct." "Instinct is better." "Not in reports." Agatha deflated slightly. "Someone stole my fingerprint. Don't tell me that's coincidence." "I'm not," Bill said. "I just need you to stay calm." "Calm is for people with alibis," Charles barked a quiet laugh. Bill gave him a long-suffering look. They moved to a corner table, away from Doris's eager ears. Charles slid into the seat beside Agatha. "We found another detail," Charles said. "The gold button you spotted." "The one Ivy lost conveniently," Charles nodded. "It matches her WI blazer. Same crest, same edging." "Ivy's guilty," Agatha declared. "Possibly," Bill said, "but she denies everything, claims she lost it ages ago." "Ages ago," Agatha repeated. "How wonderfully vague." Bill sighed. "Ivy wears jasmine perfume. Overpowering jasmine." Agatha paused. "Why is that relevant?" "Because," Bill said carefully, "Penelope woke again. She says she remembers the saboteur leaning over her basket. And she remembers their perfume." Agatha leaned in. "What perfume?" "Strong jasmine. Horribly sweet," she said. Agatha felt a spark ignite in her chest. "Ivy." "Perhaps," Bill said, "or someone wearing Ivy's perfume." Agatha slammed her glass on the table. "Everyone in this village needs a warning label." "Agatha," Bill said gently, "don't do anything rash." "I don't do rash things," she snapped. Charles choked on his drink. Bill raised a hand. "Please, let me handle Ivy." "You can handle her politely," Agatha said. "I'll handle her effectively." Bill rubbed his forehead. "Mrs. Raisin," but she was already standing. "No one frames me and gets away with it." Villagers watched her leave with the rapt attention of children seeing a fireworks fuse catch flame. Agatha stomped toward Ivy Cummings's cottage on Mill Lane, her coat flapping like a banner of war. Charles followed reluctantly, hands in pockets, expression resigned. "You can't storm her house," he said. "I can storm anything I please." "True," Charles said. "But should you?" "Absolutely." Ivy opened the door before Agatha even knocked. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she said. "What now?" "Confess," Agatha said. "To what?" "To everything." Ivy crossed her arms. "This again?" "Your button was found at the WI Hall." "I told the sergeant I lost it ages ago." "Your perfume." "Is divine," Ivy sniffed. "Men adore it." "Penelope smelled it," Agatha said, "right before she collapsed." A flicker crossed Ivy's face. Fear, guilt, annoyance. It was hard to tell, but she recovered quickly. "I didn't poison her, Agatha. I dislike her, yes, but poisoning, that requires effort." "You had plenty of motive." "So did you," Ivy snapped. Agatha stiffened. Charles stepped between them like a weary referee. "Ladies, please, let's not reenact the Wars of the Roses." But Ivy was already slamming the door. "Coward," Agatha shouted. "Aggie," Charles said softly, "we should go before someone reports you." Agatha stormed off. Charles followed, sighing as if he'd aged 10 years. By the time Agatha reached home, twilight had softened the village into blurred edges and warm lamplight. She pushed through her front door, sagging slightly. Hodge padded over, rubbing his head against her leg, which softened her enough to sit. She stroked him slowly. His purr filled the cottage like distant thunder, gentle, grounding. "They think they can break me," she murmured. "They have no idea who they're dealing with." Hodge stretched, curling beside her like an anchor. Agatha leaned back, the room dim, the mystery tightening around her like a net. Someone was framing her. Someone with access, nerve, and a jasmine-scented vengeance. She closed her eyes for one moment. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "I fight back properly." Hodge flicked his tail in quiet agreement. Carsely's morning weather seemed undecided, offering a half-hearted pale sunshine that flickered in and out behind wandering clouds. Agatha left her cottage with the speed and purpose of someone who had made up her mind and intended the village to know it. She slammed the door shut, earning a startled glare from Hodge, who had been mid-groom. He sat on the windowsill, tail twitching like a metronome set to disapproval. "You stay there," Agatha said. "I'm going to confront a liar." The liar in question was Ivy Cummings, though Agatha was perfectly open to the possibility that several other WI members would reveal themselves to be liars before the day was out. Mill Lane carried the familiar morning chorus, a distant lawnmower, clattering teacups from Doris Simpson's kitchen, and a black bird doing its level best to compete with the gossip network. Agatha reached the WI hall where women were already gathering in brisk, judgmental clusters. The hall door stood wide open, as if inviting drama. Agatha stepped inside and took in the scene. The atmosphere crackled. Ivy stood near the front, arms folded tightly, chin raised in a posture of wounded dignity. Alice Withers hovered close, hovering like a solicitor eager to whisper threats. Lila Trent sat off to one side, nervously twisting a napkin. Mrs. Bloxby was also present, seated quietly near the back. She caught Agatha's eye and offered her a soft, steady smile, like a hand on the shoulder from across the room. "Ladies," Agatha announced, striding forward, "we need a conversation." "Oh no," Ivy muttered loudly. "Here she goes." "Yes, here I go," Agatha replied, "because someone here is lying, and I'd like to sort that out before lunch." A murmur rippled through the room. Alice straightened, prim as ever. "I saw Ivy rushing between blankets at the picnic." She was very near Penelope's basket. "I was not rushing," Ivy snapped. "I was briskly relocating. Someone spilled lemonade on my blanket." "And yet," Agatha said, "Penelope remembers jasmine perfume near her basket. Yours could stun cattle." "My perfume is refined," Ivy declared. "Refined like paint stripper," Agatha said. Gasps fluttered around the hall. Mrs. Bloxby bit back a smile. "You hate Penelope," Agatha continued. "You argued with her during the last bake rota." "Everyone hates Penelope," Ivy retorted. "She criticized my handwriting, said it looked like ants had marched through ink." "Did she steal any money from you?" Agatha asked pointedly. Ivy paused. "Not stealing, misallocating." "Oh, do be precise," Agatha said. "It helps in murder investigations." Lila suddenly let out a choked sob. All heads turned. "I need to say something," she whispered. Penelope broke into my kitchen." Agatha blinked. "She did what?" Lila nodded, trembling. 3 days before the picnic, I found her rummaging in my cupboards. She said she was checking for missing bake sale funds." Ivy huffed. "That woman had the subtlety of a bulldozer." "She accused me of stealing," Lila said through tears, "but I never took anything. I swear it." Mrs. Bloxby rose and moved to sit beside Lila, rubbing her arm gently. "You're safe here, dear. Just tell us." Agatha felt the shift in the room. People were suddenly thinking about Penelope not as a victim, but as a tyrant with a busy agenda. Embarrassment, resentment, jealousy, ingredients ripe for poison. Agatha took a cautious step closer to Ivy. "Show me your handbag." "Absolutely not," Ivy snapped. "This is harassment." "Good," Agatha said. "I'm feeling harassing." Alice Withers glared. "Agatha, you cannot demand to see someone's personal belongings." "Watch me." Ivy puffed herself up. "Fine. If it ends your ridiculous accusations." She thrust her handbag at Agatha. It was a sizable thing, the colour of wilted roses with a gold clasp shaped like a snarling cherub. Agatha flipped it open. Inside lay the usual assortment: purse, lipstick, tissues that had been used once but saved for vague future reasons, and a smear of unmistakable blue icing streaked across the inner lining. Agatha lifted the handbag slightly. "Explain this." Ivy froze. "Penelope's cake icing," Agatha said. "Unless you've taken up baking as a hobby, though I doubt that." I tried to clean up the picnic tables," Ivy said weakly. "There was icing everywhere." Agatha turned to Mrs. Bloxby. "Does Ivy clean things?" "Never," Mrs. Bloxby said softly. Ivy sputtered. "Well, I did that day." "Of course you did," Agatha said. "Out-of-character acts are so suspicious." "This is a witch hunt," Ivy cried. "No," Agatha said. "This is basic observation." Before the argument could explode further, the hall door opened and Bill Wong entered. He looked as though he'd aged 10 years since morning. He surveyed the room. "Ladies, please, remember, this is a community space, not a courtroom." "Tell her that," Ivy snapped, pointing at Agatha. "She's accusing everyone but herself." "She doesn't need to accuse herself," Doris Simpson said from the back. "The evidence is doing that for her." Agatha groaned. "Doris, honestly." Bill raised a hand. "Enough. I only came to deliver an update, not referee a civil war." Agatha crossed her arms. "Well?" Bill exhaled slowly. "We've confirmed the poison used on Penelope's cake." The hall fell silent. "It was bitter almond essence," Bill said. "Highly concentrated. Not sold in ordinary shops. Only one boutique in Evesham stocks it." Agatha turned sharply. "The one Ivy shops at." Ivy recoiled. "Lots of people go there." "Do they?" Agatha asked sweetly. "Or is it just you because the owner gives you discounts?" "I am a valued customer," Ivy sniffed. "A valued customer of poison," Agatha added. Bill shot her a warning look but didn't correct her. Ivy's eyes filled with panic. Alice Withers stepped forward. "This is becoming absurd. Ivy may have bought almond essence for baking. That is hardly incriminating." "She doesn't bake," Agatha reminded her. "Well, she might have intended to try," Alice said desperately. Agatha approached Ivy slowly. The women in the hall watched as if witnessing a lioness cornering a sheep that had been rude too many times. "Ivy," Agatha said calmly, "tell the truth. Were you near Penelope's table before she collapsed?" Ivy shook her head. "No." "Were you rushing between blankets?" "No." Alice raised her hand. "I saw—" "Alice," Agatha snapped. "You saw a shadow. You squint at the sun and call it suspicious." Alice pursed her lips, offended but unable to deny it. Agatha turned back to Ivy. "Did you see Penelope switch anything, or anyone go near her basket?" I don't know," Ivy whispered. "Everything happened so fast." "No," Agatha said quietly. "It happened slowly, deliberately. Someone switched the cake. Someone planted the icing. Someone stole my fingerprints." The hall murmured. "Your fingerprints?" Alice said, eyes widening. "Long story," Agatha muttered. Bill stepped forward. "Ladies, please. I need to manage this." But Ivy had begun to shake. Her hands fluttered like startled birds. "I didn't do this," she said. "I swear it." "Then why run?" Agatha asked. "I'm not—" Before she finished, Ivy dropped her handbag, grabbed her coat, and bolted toward the door. "Oh, for heaven's sake," Agatha said, hurrying after her. Ivy stumbled only once before racing outside, her shoes clacking loudly against the stone steps. In her haste, she left something behind, something that fell from her coat and landed with a soft, wilted flop on the wooden floor. A floppy sun hat, wide-brimmed, cream-coloured, identical to the one Penelope had described. Agatha's mouth dropped open. She picked it up with 2 fingers. The hall erupted. Mrs. Bloxby approached with calm eyes, touching Agatha's elbow. "Easy, dear. Don't jump to conclusions." Agatha stared at the hat. "I'm not jumping. I'm leaping." Bill rubbed his temples. "I'll talk to Ivy. You stay here." "Not a chance," Agatha said. "Agatha, please." "Bill, I've had notes shoved under my door, a fingerprint stolen, and half the village whispering about me. If Ivy knows something, she's going to tell me." She marched toward the exit, sun hat in hand, with Charles appearing at her side as if summoned by tension. Roy Silver trailed behind, muttering about iconic village scandals. As Agatha stepped out into the soft afternoon light, she knew one thing: someone was about to crack, and she sincerely hoped it wasn't her. The next morning arrived with a washed-out sky and the faintest promise of sunshine, the sort that pretended to brighten things but didn't quite commit. Agatha stood by her living-room window, arms folded, glaring at the floppy hat on her coffee table as though it had personally insulted her. Hodge sat beside it, sniffing the brim with a superior air, then turning away as if even he found the hat suspiciously convenient. "Exactly," Agatha said. "Too convenient. Too neat." The village would already be buzzing. Ivy Cummings fleeing the WI Hall had been theatrical enough. Dropping the perfect clue on her way out had pushed it into legend. Agatha wasn't fooled. Ivy couldn't organise a shopping list, let alone a framed job. She grabbed her handbag. "Come along, brain," she muttered to herself. "We have idiots to interrogate." Hodge blinked slowly, unimpressed. Outside, the Cotswold air felt cool and faintly sweet. Light filtered through drifting cloud, giving the cottages a soft glow. Carsely looked harmless, almost friendly, which was precisely why it annoyed Agatha. A village with that much charm should commit far fewer crimes. She marched down the lane and nearly collided with Charles Fraith, who stood leaning against his vintage convertible with the posture of a man modelling aristocratic ennui. "Morning, Aggie," he said, smiling. "You look ready to throttle someone." "Ivy's hat was planted," Agatha declared. "No one is that obliging." "I agree," Charles said. "Ivy is dramatic, but she isn't clever." "Thank you," Agatha replied. "For once we're aligned." Roy Silver popped up from the passenger seat, hair windswept, holding a camcorder. "Absolutely not Ivy. She couldn't frame a picture, let alone a person." Agatha groaned. "Are you filming again?" "Just capturing rural tension," Roy said. "It sells." "Turn it off before I create an actual crime scene." Roy sighed but lowered the camera. Charles glanced at the hat Agatha was clutching. "Well, it does look exactly like the one Penelope described." "That's the problem," Agatha said. "It's too perfect, like a prop." Charles opened the passenger door with a flourish. "Shall we visit Ivy anyway? Bill will expect us to behave." "Bill expects too much," Agatha said, sliding in. "But fine." They drove toward Ivy's cottage. Narrow hedgerows brushed the sides of the car, the road curling like a ribbon dropped by someone careless. Ivy's house came into view, neat and tidy, more from fastidious tidiness than good taste. Bill Wong's car was already outside. "Oh, excellent," Agatha muttered. "The voice of reason." Bill stepped out as they arrived, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Agatha, Charles, please tell me you're not here to interrogate Ivy again." "Ivy interrogates herself by existing," Agatha said. "She's shaken," Bill said. "She claims she ran due to panic." Agatha snorted. "She always panics. She panicked once because her kettle whistled too loudly." Bill held up a small notebook. "Penelope remembers something new. The saboteur had a scratch on their wrist." Agatha blinked. "Ivy's wrists are smoother than marble." "Exactly," Bill said, "which makes things complicated." Charles leaned on the car door. "Lila Trent had a plaster on her wrist earlier." Agatha stiffened. "She did," Bill sighed. "I'll speak with her, but gently. She's fragile." "Fragile people can poison too," Agatha said. "Not usually with precision," Bill replied. Agatha exchanged a glance with Charles. They both knew what came next. "You're going to see her anyway, aren't you?" Bill asked. "Yes," Agatha said, already turning. "Of course," Bill muttered. "Try not to terrify her." "No promises." Lila Trent lived in a cottage that smelled perpetually of vanilla sponge and quiet regret. When she opened the door, she looked startled, then resigned, then worried, all in 3 seconds. "Mrs. Raisin," she said nervously. "I wasn't expecting visitors." "We need to talk," Agatha said briskly. "About your wrist." Lila's hand flew instinctively to the plaster. "Oh, this? It's nothing." "Nothing often becomes something in this village," Agatha replied. Charles coughed softly. "May we come in?" Lila stepped aside. The kitchen was tidy, though a few crumbs hinted at a recent baking attempt. The scent of tea lingered. "Sit, please," Lila said hastily. Agatha remained standing. "Tell me about the scratch." Lila swallowed hard. "It wasn't from the picnic. It happened before." "When before?" "2 days before the picnic," Lila whispered. When I tried to stop a fight." Charles raised his brows. "A fight?" Lila nodded, twisting a dish towel. "Between Penelope and Graham. She was shouting at him, something about ruining his career, about accounts, about money going missing. He grabbed her arm. She slapped him. I tried to get between them and, well, he shoved me." Agatha stared. "Graham shoved you?" "He apologized later," Lila said quickly. "But Penelope said she'd expose him publicly if he didn't fix everything." "Fix what?" Agatha demanded. "I don't know," Lila said. "They kept saying figures and funds and your carelessness. It was horrible." Agatha's thoughts swirled. Graham's immaculate house, his over-scrubbed gloves, his lack of concern, and now a fight. "Why didn't you tell Bill?" Charles asked gently. "I was scared," Lila whispered. "Penelope had a way of turning things around, and Graham is persuasive when he wants to be." Agatha softened her tone. "Lila, did you poison Penelope?" No, Lila cried. Never. I was terrified something awful would happen, but I didn't think it would be this. Agatha wandered to the counter. A candle sat near the sink, white, elegant, with a faint floral scent. She lifted it and sniffed. Jasmine. Her pulse quickened. Lila, she said sharply, why do you have jasmine? Lila blinked. Oh, Penelope gave me that. Last month she said my cottage smelled too rustic. Agatha stared at the candle. Of course. Another misdirection. Charles moved closer, looking at Agatha pointedly. False lead? False lead, Agatha muttered. Lila's eyes brimmed with tears. I'm not clever enough to poison anyone. Don't say that, Agatha said irritably. You're cleverer than Ivy. Lila sniffed. Everyone's cleverer than Ivy. Fair point. Agatha sat down reluctantly. Lila handed her a biscuit. Shortbread, light and crisp. Agatha accepted it, mostly because stress required carbohydrates. Lila, she said after a moment, did Penelope mention anyone else? Anyone she planned to confront? Lila hesitated. Only that someone was stealing from the raffle fund. She said she knew who. Agatha leaned in. Who? I don't know, Lila whispered, but she was writing a list. A list? Agatha repeated. Where? In her blue notebook, the one she always carried. Agatha stood abruptly. We need that notebook. Bill will have it, Charles said. No, Agatha replied. Bill said Graham hid things. If he hid the gloves, he may have hidden the notebook. Lila's expression tightened with fear. You think Graham? He had motive, opportunity, and access, Agatha said. The Holy Trinity. Charles sighed. Aggie, we can't accuse him yet. Watch me. Lila's voice wavered. Please be careful. Agatha touched her arm briefly. I'm always careful. Charles made a noise that sounded suspiciously like a laugh. They left Lila's cottage and stepped into the cool afternoon air. Village sounds drifted toward them, a distant kettle whistle, the flap of laundry on a line, Doris Simpson complaining loudly to someone unlucky enough to be outside. Let's think logically, Charles said as they walked. If Ivy didn't do it and Lila's involvement is a misdirection, who benefits from framing Agatha? Someone who knows I investigate, Agatha replied. Someone who fears exposure. Graham? Possibly. Alice Withers? She's petty, not strategic. Doris? Doris couldn't poison a goldfish. Charles considered. Then someone is manipulating all these clues. Agatha nodded. That's why Ivy's hat was too convenient. Someone wanted us to latch onto it. And the blue icing in her handbag? Charles asked. Also planted, Agatha said. Ivy never cleans anything. Her handbag is practically a biohazard. They reached the village green just as Roy Silver rounded the corner, breathless, clutching his camera. Aggie, Roy cried. Someone posted a new note through your door. Dramatic, terrifying, very cinematic. A note, Agatha said sharply. When? Just now, Roy said. I saw it flutter in. I retrieved it carefully and avoided a bee attack in the process. You're welcome. Agatha snatched the envelope from his hand. Cream paper, neat handwriting, the same as the earlier notes. She tore it open. 3 words stared back at her. Tomorrow you fall. Charles swore softly. Roy gasped like an opera singer. Agatha stared at the note, her jaw tightening. They really don't know who they're dealing with, she murmured. Charles placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. Aggie, no, she said. They started this. Her eyes narrowed to sharp points. Tomorrow, she said quietly, someone else falls. Hodge, watching from her cottage window across the green, flicked his tail as if approving the declaration. Carsely woke to a pale, brittle sunlight that made everything look deceptively peaceful. Agatha Raisin stared out of her bedroom window with a grim, flinty expression. Somewhere in the village, Graham Prowse was carrying on as though he hadn't nearly killed his own wife and framed Agatha in the process. Hodge sat on the windowsill beside her, tail flicking in agreement with every muttered insult she threw at the man. Coward, she said, and a sloppy one. If you're going to poison anyone, at least don't leave your financial crimes lying around. Hodge made a sound that might have been feline judgment. Agatha marched downstairs, grabbed her coat, and strode out before she could second-guess herself. The village looked calm, doors opening, kettles boiling, Doris Simpson already sweeping her front step as though polishing her own reputation. Agatha ignored the suspicious glances and made her way toward Bill Wong's car pulling into the lane. Bill stepped out, shoulders hunched, face already weary. "Agatha, I was just coming to see you." "Too late," Agatha said. "I'm coming to see Penelope, and you're giving me a lift." Bill sighed. "I suppose arguing is pointless." "Correct." They drove to Mercester Hospital. The quiet corridors, disinfectant tang, and distant beeps formed a stark contrast to Carsley's cosy clutter. Penelope Prouse looked even paler than before, though her eyes sharpened when she saw Agatha. "Mrs. Raisin," she croaked, "I didn't expect you." "No one ever does," Agatha said, pulling up a chair. "You have information. Give it." Bill winced. "Agatha, please." "No, she's right," Penelope rasped. "I've been thinking. Before the picnic, I kept notes. Detailed notes. About everything." "Everything," Agatha said. "Define." "Picnic money. Odd transactions, missing funds. I kept it all in my handbag. I had it at the picnic. Then," she shuddered, "then everything went wrong." Agatha froze. "Your handbag is missing." Penelope nodded faintly. "Graham always said I obsessed, said I was dramatic, but money was disappearing. My notes proved it." Agatha exchanged a sharp look with Bill. "And Graham knew you had those notes?" Penelope closed her eyes. He knew. Something cold settled in Agatha's chest. She rose abruptly. "Bill, we're leaving." "Agatha, move." Outside on the hospital steps, Bill caught her arm. "Agatha, you cannot run into this blindly." "Blind?" she snapped. "Bill, the woman kept receipts, lists, and proof. Her handbag vanished the same moment she collapsed. If Graham didn't take it, I'll eat my own handbag." Bill looked torn between professional restraint and reluctant agreement. "All right, but we do this properly." Agatha snorted. "You keep saying that." Back in Carsely, Agatha practically leapt out of Bill's car at the green. Charles Fraith was waiting with 2 coffees and an expression that suggested life had been far too exciting for his liking. "I assume this is about the notes Penelope kept?" he asked. Agatha grabbed the coffee. "Her handbag is missing, which means it's somewhere people weren't supposed to look." "We're searching again?" Charles asked. "Yes. Every hedge, every hiding place, every smug patch of grass." Charles sighed but followed dutifully. They combed the green, starting with the hedge line bordering the picnic area. Agatha marched like a general, pulling branches aside with no regard for thorns. Charles moved in slower sweeps, scanning the ground. "People don't bury things neatly," Agatha muttered. "They shove, they panic, they hide in haste." "Meaning we should look for something messy," Charles said. "Precisely." They reached a section where the hedge grew uneven, as though someone had barged through days earlier. Agatha crouched, brushing aside leaves. Something pale caught her eye. "Charles," she said sharply. "Torch." He fished one from his coat pocket, switched it on, and angled the light beneath the hedge. There it was, half buried, mud-streaked, the faint scent of jasmine wafting up as Agatha dragged it free. Penelope's handbag. Charles exhaled slowly. "Well, that's rather on the nose." "Too on the nose," Agatha said, "which means it's genuine." She opened the bag carefully. Inside were papers, all slightly damp but intact, receipts, handwritten notes, dates circled with irritated loops, and 3 pages stapled together marked, "Picnic Funds, Graham's Mistakes." Agatha grinned, the predatory sort of grin reserved for moments when she knew she was absolutely right. "He's been embezzling for months," she said. "Penelope discovered it, and the moment she planned to expose him—" "He panicked," Charles finished. "Quite stupidly." Agatha held up a receipt. "This is from March. He withdrew £300 from the fund, another from April, £120, and May, £85. He wasn't even subtle." "Most criminals aren't," Charles said. Footsteps approached. Bill appeared, breathing hard. "You two could at least pretend you're not always one step ahead," he said. "We found it," Agatha said, holding up the bag. Bill blinked. "Good Lord. Where?" "Hidden like an afterthought," Agatha replied, "like a man desperate, hurried, and stupid." Bill knelt, opening the bag as carefully as she had. His eyes widened at the receipts. "Well," he said, voice grim, "this changes everything." "He also admitted taking Ivy's old sun hat from her shed," Bill said tiredly, "and a spare button off her WI blazer. He scattered them around to point suspicion her way." "Does it?" Agatha said. Or does it confirm what every woman in this village already suspects? Bill ignored that. He pulled out a small evidence kit and began dusting the edges. Fingerprints, he murmured. Give me fingerprints. Agatha crossed her arms. You'll find his. He's careless. If I find yours again. Oh, do shut up, she said. No one plants my fingerprints twice. Charles leaned on a post, looking almost proud. It's rather satisfying, Aggie. It will be satisfying when Graham is behind bars. Bill straightened. Agatha. His tone had changed. Agatha knew that tone. Something grim was coming. His prints are here, Bill said, all over the lining and on the receipts. Agatha nodded. Good. Bill hesitated. But that's not all. We just received word from Mercester Police. Agatha froze. What word? Graham, Bill said carefully, has fled his house. Agatha's stomach tightened. When? This morning, before dawn. Coward, she hissed. He didn't pack much, Bill continued. Most of his clothes are still there. Because he wasn't planning on getting caught, Agatha said, and now he's running, like all guilty little men with weak chins. His chin is perfectly normal, Charles noted. Shut up, Charles. Bill scrubbed a hand through his hair. We'll circulate his description. If he's anywhere in the Cotswolds, we'll find him. Agatha stepped closer, eyes sharp. Bill, he's desperate, and desperate men do stupid things. Which is why you need to stay out of this, Bill said firmly. No chasing him, no provoking him, no... Bill, Agatha said sweetly, when have I ever listened to that speech? He closed his eyes. Never. Precisely. Charles chuckled softly. Bill looked between them, Agatha bristling, Charles resigned, and knew he had already lost the argument. Agatha, he said, lowering his voice, this is serious. If Graham poisoned Penelope and framed you and has now fled, he is dangerous. Dangerous people don't scare me, Agatha said. Stupid people do. Please, Bill said, stay home. Lock your door, just until we find him. Agatha tilted her chin. I will not hide in my cottage like a frightened mouse. You're far too loud for a mouse, Charles said. Thank you, Agatha replied. Bill pinched the bridge of his nose. At least promise. No. Agatha, Bill, someone sent me a note last night saying, tomorrow you fall. If I hide now, they've already won. Bill blanched. You didn't tell me that. Because you worry, Agatha said, and worrying slows you down. Charles looked at her with something suspiciously like admiration. You do like a fight, he murmured. Agatha shot him a look. I like justice. The three stood at the edge of the green, the found handbag lying between them like a piece of battlefield loot. The air felt sharper now, the afternoon shadows longer. Graham was running. Penelope was remembering. Someone was threatening Agatha, and the village, with all its cosy hedgerows and gossiping tea shops, was closing in on the truth faster than anyone expected. Bill's radio crackled. He lifted it, listened, and stiffened. That was Mercester, Bill said. Graham's car was seen heading toward the old quarry road. Agatha's heartbeat quickened. The one that leads nowhere? Exactly, Bill said. Running men often run to empty places. Agatha looked toward the lane leading out of Carsely. The sky seemed to dim slightly, clouds gathering like spectators. Bill, she said softly, you'd better hurry. We will, Bill said. And you? Yes, yes, Agatha said. I'll be careful. Bill gave her a look that suggested he knew she would do the exact opposite. He rushed to his car. Charles watched him go, then glanced at Agatha. Aggie, he said quietly, do not do something heroic. Heroic? She scoffed. I prefer to think of it as extremely proactive. She turned toward her cottage, coat snapping behind her like a battle flag. Hodge waited in the window, tail flicking. The chase had begun. The next morning arrived with a sulking sky. Thin streaks of cloud drifted low, the sort that promised rain simply to spite people who hoped for clear weather. Agatha Raisin stood at her cottage window, glaring at the lane as if she could summon Graham Prowse into view by sheer fury. Hodge sat beside her, tail flicking in supportive irritation. He's hiding somewhere pathetic, Agatha muttered. Cowards never choose scenic locations. Hodge blinked, unimpressed by criminal psychology. A knock sounded. Agatha stormed to the door and yanked it open. Charles Fraith stood there, hair windswept, expression droll. Good morning, Aggie. Bill says Graham's car was spotted near Morton-in-Marsh. Which means we're leaving immediately. We? Don't be ridiculous, Charles. You're coming. Charles gave the resigned sigh of a man who had accepted long ago that his hobbies included dangerous errands with stubborn women. "Fine, but I'm driving. You'll kill us both before we reach the main road." Agatha marched past him with purpose. Only if the main road deserved it. The landscape grew patchy and uneven as they approached Morton's outskirts. Trees gathered thickly, fields sloping into dips, hedges narrowing. Charles turned onto a smaller dirt lane. "This leads to the old orchard," he said, "popular with teenagers, delinquents, and people wanting to bury shameful secrets." "Then Graham will be here," Agatha said. The first needle-like drops of rain began as they stepped out of the car. Not a drizzle, not a shower, just thin, needling stabs designed solely to irritate. "Of course," Agatha muttered, "rain with attitude." They walked toward the orchard. Twisted apple trees stretched outward like reaching arms. Last year's fruit lay in shriveled, sour clusters beneath the branches. The grass was ankle-deep and slick from previous showers. "This place is depressing," Agatha said. "You're the one who wanted dramatic confrontation," Charles replied, "not soggy confrontation." Movement flickered behind a tree. Charles caught it first. "Aggie," he whispered. "There." Graham Prowse stepped partially into view. He looked wild, shirt wrinkled, hair limp with sweat, expression frayed. As soon as he spotted Agatha, his eyes widened with a mixture of fear and annoyance. "Oh no," Graham groaned, "not you." "Yes," Agatha said, striding forward. "Me." He backed up. "I didn't hurt anyone." "You poisoned your wife," Agatha snapped, "and framed me, and stole money, and hid handbags like a lunatic." "I didn't mean to poison her that badly," Graham cried. "I only meant to make her too ill to speak at the picnic, that's all." Agatha halted, stunned by the sheer stupidity. "You planned to give your wife food poisoning to avoid a lecture? She was going to ruin my career," he wailed. "You don't have a career," Agatha shot back. "You have a folding table, some bunting, and a ledger." Charles coughed. "Aggie, perhaps moderation." "No moderation," Agatha said. "I am done with moderation." Graham raised his hands as if fending off her fury. "I never expected the cake switch to get complicated. I just needed a moment alone with her basket." "So, you wore her floppy hat," Agatha said sharply, hoping no one would notice the difference. "Yes," Graham cried. "She had loads of silly hats. I grabbed one. I thought it would disguise me." "It disguised you as a middle-aged woman with poor taste," Agatha replied. "You should have gone with a false moustache. At least that would have been creative." Graham's expression crumpled. "It wasn't supposed to go this far. I panicked." "And the notes?" Bill asked. "The letters to Penelope. The threats pushed under Mrs. Raisin's door." Graham closed his eyes. "Mine. All mine. I wrote every one." "Panicked enough to steal notes, hide receipts, plant icing, frame me using fingerprints from my own basket?" "You were standing near the table," Graham said miserably. "Everyone saw you. It seemed convenient." "I used one of your raffle tickets," he added weakly. "You'd handled the stack. I pressed one onto the tin with your print on it." "Convenient?" Agatha repeated dangerously. "Convenient?" Charles placed a calming hand on her shoulder. "Aggie, let Bill handle—" "No," Agatha snapped. "I'm handling." She took a step toward Graham. Rain needled her face, making her look all the more fearsome. "You nearly killed her," she said fiercely. "You nearly destroyed me. And for what? £300 here, £80 there, cream buns, picnic cutlery. Honestly, Graham, if you're going to embezzle, at least choose something glamorous." "I didn't steal much," he shouted. "Just enough to supplement things." "Supplement what?" Agatha demanded. "Your terrible wardrobe?" Graham flinched, hand tightening against his side. And that was the moment Bill Wong appeared between the trees, 2 uniformed officers behind him. "Graham Prowse," Bill called firmly. "Do not move." Graham sagged in defeat. "Oh, come on." Bill approached, his expression equal parts stern and exhausted. "You fled the village, attempted to evade questioning, and hid evidence. That alone—" "I was scared," Graham snapped. "Good," Agatha said. "Fear becomes you." Bill shot her a warning look. "Agatha, please let me do my job." "If you must." Bill turned to Graham. "We have your prints on Penelope's handbag. Your financial records confirm funds missing for months. Your wife's notes outline everything, and you were seen near the hedge on the day of the picnic." "I was hiding," Graham cried. "I didn't want anyone to see the hat." "Which hat?" Bill asked. "Penelope's floppy one," Graham said, defeated. "It hid my face." "Barely," Agatha muttered. Bill continued. Penelope also remembered a scratch on the saboteur's wrist. Graham nodded miserably. "From the thorns. I tripped. I'm not athletic." "And the jasmine scent?" Charles asked. Graham's cheeks flushed. "Cheap aftershave. Penelope hated it. Said it made me smell like a florist attacked me." Agatha rolled her eyes. "You framed half the WI because you shop at a discount perfumery." "I panicked," he repeated helplessly. "Stop saying panicked," Agatha snapped. "It makes you sound like a frightened pigeon." Bill finally stepped forward. "Graham Prowse, I'm arresting you for attempted poisoning, embezzlement, perverting the course of justice, and reckless endangerment." "Reckless endangerment of common sense," Agatha added. "Agatha," Bill warned. "Fine," she said. "I'll be quiet." Charles barked a laugh. The officers moved in, cuffing Graham, who sagged like a deflated sponge. Rain trickled down his forehead, adding to the overall air of pathetic collapse. "Penelope was going to embarrass me," Graham muttered. "I just wanted to stop her speech." "By killing her," Agatha said sharply. "I didn't know it was that strong. The almond essence, it was on sale." "People like you shouldn't be allowed near sales," Agatha shot back. Bill shook his head. "Enough. Get him in the car." As they led Graham away, Agatha stood with arms crossed, the rain softening around her. She felt a prickly mixture of triumph and irritation. Charles tilted his head. "Well, that was dramatic." "I'm owed praise," Agatha said. "Bill didn't even congratulate me." "He's busy arresting someone." "Still." Bill approached, rain beading on his jacket. "Agatha, thank you." She raised an eyebrow. "That it?" "Yes," Bill said. "Because with you, anything more would encourage you." She almost smiled. Almost. They returned to Carsely in the late afternoon. The rain had drifted off, leaving puddles and a faint shine on the roads. The village looked deceptively peaceful, but as Agatha and Charles crossed the green, she noticed curtains twitch, whispered voices behind windows, Doris Simpson leaning dramatically on her doorframe. "Here it comes," Agatha muttered. Doris called out first. "Agatha, is it true you chased a criminal into an orchard?" "Yes," Agatha said, "and yelled at him until he confessed?" "Also yes." "And is it true you nearly got yourself killed?" "Sadly no," Agatha replied. Doris sighed with disappointment. More villagers emerged, peppering her with questions, theories, compliments, and thin-lipped warnings. Agatha handled them with sharp replies and dry humour, but by the time she reached her cottage door, she felt wrung out. Hodge was waiting in the window, tail curled neatly around him. Inside, the cottage smelled warm and familiar. Agatha tossed her coat across a chair, collapsed onto the sofa, and exhaled deeply. Hodge hopped into her lap, kneading her stomach with proprietary satisfaction. "You're the only one who appreciates me," she murmured. Hodge blinked smugly. She stroked him, letting the warmth settle her. Outside, Carsely hummed with gossip and relief, the way it always did when a storm had passed but hadn't quite finished echoing. Agatha closed her eyes. She'd solved another case. She'd survived humiliation, poison, fingerprints, hats, and the WI. But Carsely? Carsely would continue being Carsely, and she wouldn't have it any other way. Carsely regained its usual rhythm with suspicious ease, as if determined to forget that someone had tried to poison a woman during a cheerful village picnic. The hedgerows looked smug again, the cottages resumed their quiet gossip, and the Red Lion clattered with its normal measure of scandal and disappointment. Agatha Raisin watched it all with a curled lip, convinced the entire village was secretly enjoying her ordeal more than they should. A few days later, once Penelope was well enough to stand at her gate, she insisted on addressing the village. Penelope Prowse, now recovering at home with what she called admirable fortitude, had insisted on staging a public thank you outside her gate. Villagers had gathered, eager for spectacle. Agatha wished she'd stayed in bed. "Agatha," Penelope said, looking pale but theatrically brave, "I owe you my gratitude." Agatha lifted her chin. "You're welcome." "Of course," Penelope added sweetly, "I do think you interfere more than is wise, but one must give credit where it is due. You have a talent for, well, barging in." Agatha's jaw tightened. Charles, standing behind her, nudged her elbow as a warning not to explode. Bill sighed heavily. Doris Simpson leaned forward like an eager crow hoping for thrown scraps. "Thank you for the compliment," Agatha said with a brittle smile. "I enjoy being appreciated." "Oh, I didn't say appreciated," Penelope corrected. "I said talented." Agatha inhaled sharply. Only Mrs. Bloxby's calming presence kept her from throwing Penelope's vase of flowers into the nearest hedge. Bill stepped in politely before combustion occurred. "Penelope, please rest. Further statements can wait. Agatha, Charles, perhaps we let her recover." Penelope fluttered her fingers. "Yes, yes. Do take your detective theatrics elsewhere." Agatha stomped away with Charles trailing, shaking with silent laughter. "She has nerve," Agatha snapped. "I save her life and she accuses me of theatrics." "You do enjoy theatrics," Charles pointed out mildly. "That is not the point." Later that afternoon, Agatha marched to the vicarage, where Mrs. Bloxby had laid out a modest tea with homemade shortbread. The warm kitchen soothed Agatha's fraying temper. Hodge, who had accompanied her, leapt onto her lap with smug entitlement, purring as though he had solved the case himself. "Agatha," Mrs. Bloxby said gently, pouring tea, "you showed real courage." Agatha softened despite herself. "I only did what anyone would." Mrs. Bloxby smiled. "Most people would not confront a desperate man in an orchard, nor stand firm while half the WI speculated about your guilt. Justice can be bruising, even when it is right." Agatha sipped her tea and stared at the rising steam. "They'll still gossip." "Yes," Mrs. Bloxby agreed kindly, "but they'll also remember who solved it. Gossipers are fickle, but not entirely ungrateful." Hodge stretched across Agatha's knees like a warm, furry sash of victory. "At least he appreciates me," Agatha muttered. "Hodge is very wise." "He's a cat." "Exactly." Before Agatha could reply, the vicarage door burst open and Roy Silver tumbled in, breathless, holding a box. "Darlings, I come bearing pastries." "Well, they were pastries an hour ago. Now they're—" "Stale," Agatha said. "Vintage," Roy corrected proudly. Charles arrived moments later with a bottle of cheap champagne. "Picked this up on the way. Thought we should celebrate." Bill followed with a folder of paperwork that instantly killed the mood. Agatha glared. "What is that?" "Statements," Bill said apologetically. "Procedures. Nothing dramatic, just signatures confirming your involvement, discoveries, timeline. You came to ruin my victory lap." "Yes," Bill said, "but only partly." Roy plopped the stale pastries onto the table, nearly crushing Mrs. Bloxby's shortbread. Charles opened the champagne, which attempted to escape the bottle with a single unimpressive pop. The gathering grew merry despite itself. Mrs. Bloxby told gentle stories. Charles teased Agatha about her interrogation style. Roy reenacted her orchard confrontation with dramatic flourishes that made her twice as furious and twice as flattered. Bill attempted to keep order, failed, and finally accepted a cup of tea and a stale pastry. Hodge dozed through all of it, purring with serene confidence that life had returned to normal. Evening descended into a soft blue, Carsely quieted, windows glowing with comfortable lamplight. Agatha returned to her cottage, feeling tired in that peculiar way that followed the end of every case, a mix of triumph, relief, and faint, unwelcome loneliness. Inside, the hearth crackled with gentle warmth. Agatha poured a modest glass of wine, sat in her favourite chair, and allowed the quiet to settle around her. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke and the last crumbs of Mrs. Bloxby's shortbread she'd taken home. Hodge curled on the rug, paws tucked neatly beneath him, looking like he approved of her return. Agatha sighed. "Well," she murmured, "that's another case finished." Yet the familiar melancholy crept in. It always did. The village whispered, judged, wondered. Some would believe she interfered. Some would quietly admire her. Most would do both, depending on the day. She had solved the crime, but she doubted Carsely would ever fully understand her. And perhaps she didn't entirely mind. Mystery suited her, even when it bruised. She swirled her wine. "Next time," she muttered, "I'm bringing shop-bought cake and admitting it outright." Hodge stretched luxuriously, agreeing in spirit. Agatha let out a reluctant laugh. "Oh, hush, you judge me too." She leaned back, letting the fire warm her shins. Then the phone rang, a shrill ring, sharp and unexpected. Agatha froze. Hodge raised his head. She lifted the receiver. "Agatha Raisin speaking." A hesitant voice crackled down the line. "Miss Raisin? I'm sorry to trouble you, but Do you know anything about a vanishing WI treasurer? Agatha closed her eyes. Of course there's another one, she muttered, but a small, dangerous smile tugged at her mouth. Where, she asked, did she vanish from?